Okay.
This is a present from John Irwin. He's a super soldier from Britain.
Oh, cool.
Made into a super soldier brought into an elite British military force called the 16. And he's given this book personally for you. He was very keen for you to see it. And he does defence and all that. He's been out of body, seen a few things. And this is his book. One Step Beyond refers to Beyond Death.
Oh, cool.
And the 16 refers to the elite British military force of 1958-59. And one of their last missions, they encountered very big flying saucers.
Yeah. They did what?
They encountered huge flying saucers at a place called Jarabah in Syria. And that is it, formally handed over.
Thank you very much, and give my my thanks to John, and I'll be anxious to read this.
Okay, during the break, John, you referred to seeing a black shadow figure only a few minutes last night sometime. Could you mention that? Because this is important.
Well, I didn't know it was a black shadow until you just told me what they looked like. But what happened is I closed the refrigerator door, and I was walking back in here, and over by the patio door, I saw a big black thing, maybe 7 feet tall, and it was black. And I looked over like that, and there was nothing there. And I just, flipped it off until you mentioned but that's exactly what I saw, because I tried to make sense of it. I tried to look and see what made something black over there, because, you always see weird stuff around. And I couldn't see anything that would have made that black. So.
And the important thing to remember, folks, is that when you turn your head to look at it, that's when you don't see it. You only see it out of the edges of your peripheral vision.
Yeah.
So you've got to look with that in mind. And this is important because a lot of the cases in England are coming up with this, including people who make their crop circles. So maybe that might explain why you're losing stuff.
My mind?
No, you haven't lost that. You lost that years ago. Everybody lost it. We finished part one talking about aliens and stuff. What about the Bob Lazar wonderful years with George Knapp on those times? That was good fun. Tell us about that.
That was a lot of fun. Well, it all started when I gave a lecture in the early part of 1988 at the Spring Valley Library, and it created such a hoopla here in Las Vegas. People were calling me, writing me. It was driving Marilee nuts. She had never seen anything like this before, and the people were ringing the phone off the hook. But it ended up she changed our phone numbers and took all my files and hid them and told me that I couldn't do that anymore. So this guy calls up. His name's Gene Huff. And he says, I'd like to get a copy of all your tapes and papers and everything. And I said, Gene, my wife has shut me down. I can't do it. But he says, well, no problem. He said, if you ever get a chance, I'll be happy to pay for it. Or if you want an appraisal, I'm an appraiser. And just at that time, I was looking for a second mortgage on the house, needed appraisal. So I said, okay, let's do that. For my appraisal. So he came over to do the appraisal, and he brought a guy with him to hold the end of the tape, the measuring tape, and the guy's name was Bob Lazar. And so they first came in and they sat down there, and Gene and I were talking about UFOs and this and that case, and Bob was rolling his eyes. And he said, look, this stuff is pure bullshit. He said, I worked at Los Alamos. I had a highest clearance there, Q clearance. If there had been something like this, I would have known about it. And I can't tell you how many people I've heard that statement from. So anyway, make a long story short, we gave Bob Lazar enough information over the next 4 or 5 months to get him interested enough that he called Dr. Teller, the father of the H-bomb, who he had met, and asked for a job at Groom Lake. And the next thing I heard was that Bob came over. He had 3 interviews over at EG&G, and they were all technical interviews about information he knew. And after the first one, he told us that he aced the first one. And then the second one, he said he aced that too. He said, but the first question was, do you know John Lear? And what is your relationship with him? And he said, yes, I know him. I think he sticks his nose into places where it doesn't belong. He says, what I didn't tell them is I also like to stick my nose into places where it doesn't belong. And then the next thing I knew was December 6th, 1988. He comes in, sits down there. It's in the evening. He said, I saw a disc today. I said, what? He said, I saw a disc. I said, theirs or ours? He said, theirs. I said, you went to Groom Lake? He said, yeah. And I said, well, what are you coming here for? Why don't you work there a couple months? And then tell us, because they obviously followed you here. They're going to tell, that you came right up here. He said, the reason I'm doing this is I've seen you take so much crap over the last 5 or 6 months talking about this that I saw it, I felt it, I touched it, I was in it, and I just wanted to tell, it's real. So then from then on, things went bizarre. He continued to work up there, and by continued to work, I think he only went up there about 6 or 7 times. He told us when he get back what he learned up there, and then on the 21st of March of 1989, he said they're going to do a test flight tomorrow night. Do you want to go see? And I said, yeah, how? And he said, well, there's a road on the northeast of Groom Lake we can go down. And I said, yeah, I know that one. And so the next night was March 22nd. And that was the one you've seen here many times, I'm sure. We got there about 8:45, went up in my motorhome, and I got out and set up that telescope right there. And we saw it come up behind the mountains, and Gene or Bob said, look, there it is. All the time we had managed to leave the video camera on the bumper of the motorhome. And I got that set up. It flew around for maybe 5 or 10 minutes, and then it stopped, and it was settling down behind the mountains that were between us and Groom Lake. And that's when I got that focused in on a 13 or an 8-inch telescope. It's very difficult to sight something and track it manually.
Is this up and down?
So since it was going down, I could track it, and it was a flying saucer oriented about 35 to 40 degrees to the horizon. It was radiating a gold yellowish stuff. And as it came down, I said, quick, Gene, look. And as I invited Gene to look through the ocular there, and as I pulled away from it, I hooked my foot around the tripod, and it pulled it so that he couldn't see it. But then the next Wednesday, that was a Wednesday night. The next Wednesday night, I was on a trip to for the airline I worked for, and I couldn't go with them. And then the next one was the April 6th of 1989, and there was me, Bob, Gene, and Bob's wife and her sister. And we rented a car, we had a Geiger counter, all kinds of stuff in the back, and we trying to get there about 9 o'clock, and we head down that dirt road, and we got almost to where we wanted to be, and we saw 2 sets of headlights in front of us coming towards us. So we didn't want any confrontation. Bob didn't want any confrontation. So we turned around and headed for the highway. And when it became apparent that we wouldn't be able to get to the highway before they stopped us, we just pulled over. Bob jumped out into the desert, took his 9mm gun with him, and I jumped out, started setting up the telescope. And as they skidded to a halt, I went over to their vehicle. I put my hands on it and says, "You guys aren't dopers, are you? We're afraid that we ran into some kind of a dope deal." And I said, "No, we're not dopers. We need to see your driver's license and social security number." So we were there for about 45 minutes while they relayed this information. And then at the end they said, "We can't kick you out of here because this is government BLM land, but we can make it awful uncomfortable for you if you stay. So we just appreciate it if you leave." So they left, or we thought they left. because they turned around, got in the car, and headed that way. Bob waited about 15 minutes, came out from the desert. He had his gun. He said, "Oh man," he said, "I came so close to blowing that one guy away." And all the time, see, while we're talking to him, we didn't know that they'd just gone about 100 meters down the road, turned around, and were filming us in infrared, and also they had a parabolic microphone, and they were listening to everything we said. But about 15 minutes later, we decided to leave. We all got in the car. We go up, and as we hit the highway, the paved highway, there was the Lincoln County Sheriff with his siren and everything, pull over, hands up, all that stuff. And he said that when we all five were against the car with our hands up, he says, "I just want two things." He said, "I want to know why there's 5 people in the car now, and there were only 4 people when you folks were down on that road, and I want to know where the 9mm is." And so, to make a long story short, we put him off for about what?
Tell us a long story.
Well, I just told it so many times. It takes forever.
Not on high definition.
There was one. He kept asking us. He said, "I can get down a search warrant and get back here and get into your trunk. I want in now." And we wouldn't let him in. So at the very end of the hour, he said, "Well, look," he said, "I don't know why I'm being told this, but I'm to tell you to leave and not come back." And so that's when we left. And we drove back to Vegas, and we talked about how we were going to handle the story if anybody asked us. Bob was a little worried because he had to go to work the next day, and his name had come up there, went with the officers, and when the officer stopped us. So the next morning he gets a call from his boss, Dennis Mariana, and said, "Bob, don't go to the airplane today. I'm going to pick you up." And he picked him up at his house down there in West Las Vegas, drove him up to Indian Springs, which is where Creech Air Force Base, and is the center of all the intelligence of the test site, intelligence operations. And they took him out of the car with a gun in his ear and said, "Bob, when we gave you this clearance, it didn't mean you were supposed to take up all your friends and tell them about the flying saucers." And he said, the guy said, "Now, do you want to work with us or not? Because we don't want you telling everybody about this stuff." So he was non-committal, and the reason he was non-committal was because the last 2 trips he made up to Groom Lake, he could remember getting on the 737 out there at McCarran and getting off it. But he couldn't remember anything in between. He couldn't remember his work, couldn't remember what he did, none of that. And he didn't want to work under those circumstances. So in addition to the fact that they had tapped his phone and they knew that his wife was diddling around with her flight instructor, they told him, we can't have you working right now until you get your family life settled. And so then there was that period from when they agreed to part. He agreed not to go back. Was just like a week after we were caught at the test site, and then his tire got shot out on his car, and he stayed over here that night. And I remember he said, "I'm going to turn myself in." I said, "To who?" So I got him settled down, and he stayed that night, and then. At the time, coincidentally, I was doing On the Record with George Knapp. And the next Sunday, I was going to do a show with George. So I talked about this incident. What did I talk about? I forget. But anyway, it lit Las Vegas on fire. And from then on, it was...
How many of those shows did you do? Two. One
Yeah.
on your own, and then one with...
Both with George Knapp.
And
There might have been 3.
I think you did one with the guy who got shot dead years ago. Bill Cooper? Did you do one with?
Yeah,
Bill?
but not for George
UFO
Mann.
researcher John Lear.
Not for
John,
Channel
you
8.
say
Okay.
this document
Well, I'm just talking about the ones I did for George Mann.
Yeah.
I did several for Bill Cooper. The one Bill Cooper and I did for the people in Las Vegas or in Salt Lake City, when I forget that program that it was. That's the one where he told him about seeing the stuff in the Navy about
The
what
huge
did he
stuff
do?
coming out of the sea.
Say right before you describe what they are,
We
we're
have
gonna
those
take
in
a short break.
Southwest Ireland.
He told him about the krill. Oh, told him about the krill papers and the Excalibur papers. Now, the Excalibur papers were something that Bob had written a couple months before, when we had told him about a new weapon that they were developing at Los Alamos. And the Excalibur was a bomb that would hit the ground and go 1,000 feet deep and explode something 1,000 feet deep and explode it. And that was Excalibur. And then the krill papers, John Grace and I had written and put them out as a kind of a place of where we were at now, how much we knew, but in the form of a question and answer with an alien. And
But the krill,
the krill papers, Krill. So in this interview for this thing, Bill Cooper had said that he'd seen those both in the Navy. So I took him into the living room. I said, "What are you talking about?" I said, "Those are, Bob wrote that a couple of months ago, and the krill papers John Grace wrote." He said, "No, I saw him in the Navy 20 years ago." I said, "That's impossible." So anyway, we came back and we finished that, and that's when I started to break apart Bill, because I didn't know what he was talking about, these stories. He was making it up, And after that, we called it UFO disease. And UFO disease is a disease you get after you've told everything you know that people were dying to hear. They want to hear more, so you don't have any more, so you start making it up. And that's UFO
that's a
disease.
very big problem.
So,
But the krill is something that comes from the Germans, doesn't it? Not before.
well, the way where I got krill was the Pentagon had established a dialogue with an alien through a woman that they had that worked at the Pentagon, and they were talking to krill, and the spelling was CRLLL. And I told John Grace about it, and he said, "Who can we have write the krill papers, what can we give this name to?" And I said, "Why don't we use krill, but we'll just use a K." And so that's how we came up with the krill papers.
What's this dialogue with an alien then?
The Pentagon, 1950, 57, 58. It's in those books. I think it's in Stanford's book.
Now, for reference, the book that you've just been given from John Irwin, he was, since I've just interviewed him about 2 weeks ago, the British officer who brought him into that organization called the 16 appears now to have been an alien.
Really?
And that's working within the British military in 1957, that period. So, anything more about aliens, the Pentagon, stuff like that? Without getting UFO disease?
Pardon?
Without getting UFO disease?
Just, my dad was, in 1952, on this spreadsheet we've got, he was the primary contractor for ionogravity for the Department of Defense. His company was Lear Incorporated. And I never knew about it until I started researching this. So his company, Lair Incorporated, was heavily involved. And on the internet, if every once in a while, this 3-minute tape shows up showing my father giving a lecture, and there's a board there, and he's got drawn a flying saucer, and he's making little comments. My mom is standing next to him, and he's giving a lecture to a bunch of scientists. And then the rest of the videotape, the film, shows the people working on balsa wood and real thin paper all through this laboratory. And then the film finishes with showing the outside, and it says the Bonson Institute. And Bonson was, of course, involved in all the anti-gravity stuff.
Now, what do you mean by "of course"? Let's talk to people who don't know about the of course bit. Explain that.
Oh, Bonson, just his name comes up, time after time after time when we're talking about UFOs.
The German flying saucer technology. Prague, World War II, the German saucers.
Yeah. I think they had real ET technology. The stuff I'm talking about is just stuff we made for us, the anti-gravity stuff. That's not near as it's not near the sophistication of the alien stuff.
How do you know that, though? How do you feel
That's
about
just an opinion.
It's just an opinion, okay.
Well, I wonder, Bob Lazar, when he said that he forgot what happened from he left the highway and came into his work, and then what happened from there on till he came back to the highway again. What did he himself think it was? What caused this? How
what are we talking about?
You just told us about the problems Bob Lazar had at work because he had talked to you and showed too much to his friends about what was happening up in this lake. And then
he was getting in trouble for taking us to watch the saucer on Wednesday night.
Yes, and then he decided it was too difficult to have this job because he could not remember what had happened while at work.
Oh, yeah.
So what did he think? What kind of technology did he feel that they...
Same job. His job was to reverse engineer the propulsion. When he went up there, they gave him a list of all the possible things that he could work on. The technology of construction, the aliens themselves, all list of different things. And he wanted to work on the propulsion, which is that right there. Now that is the main propulsion for all the saucers they had up there. It's a very sophisticated antimatter reactor. It has a piece of element 115 in there. And what they did was shoot protons into the tip of a sliver of 115, which would bump it up to 116. 115 is stable, 116 is unstable. So when the proton plugs in to the 115, makes it 116, it instantly decays back to 115. And what it radiates or throws off is antimatter and the ability to access the gravity A wave. Now the antimatter they mix with matter in this little teeny cup to create heat, which through a thermionic generator creates positive voltage, and they use that to power the craft. But when the 116 decays to 115, they can actually pull out the gravity wave, the A wave, access it, amplify it, and send it out into space to pull onto space and pull that space towards them, wrap it around the ship, turn it off, and they're instantaneously 100,000 miles away.
So it's a dimensional distort, it's a controllable dimensional distort device.
You could call it that. And this thing can recycle every 12 milliseconds. So every 12 milliseconds, they can make a hop, which is 100,000 miles or however far the one beam, the one beam can make it. If you want to pull that piece, cardboard right there. Okay, this is 3 different drawings here. This one over here shows the gravity A wave being wrapped around the saucer, and the 3 gravity amplifiers, A, B, and C, are focused that way into infinity, and they're pulling a portion of space hundreds of thousands of miles away and wrapping it around this saucer here. And here, a saucer, this is how the combined wavefront, there's 3 gravity amplifiers here, and this amplifier is pointed out this way, this one is pointed out this way, and B is pointed down. And that keeps it up against the piece of mass that's right there. And then this one here, we should be looking at it the other way, but see if you can imagine the 3 gravity waves down here. And what this is this is a magnification of the very, very end of the of this amplifier, and it says 100 centimeters, and it's a little circle like that. And that 100 centimeters is what hundreds of thousands of miles out, exercises that gravity amplification. And that's what pulls it all towards the craft. Okay, we're done.
But that was not my question was, what kind of technology did John Lear think that they have used on him to not remember things?
Oh, mind control. Mind control. They have a very...
Can you control how you discuss this? How?
Mind control was very thoroughly researched by the Nazis. The Nazis came over to the U.S. In 1948-49, took over just about everything, and then even improved even more the mind control that they did. Now, this thing that we're talking about, Bob, happened in 1988. The mind control was so advanced that in 1969 we could make the entire astronaut corps think they'd been to the moon when they hadn't been any farther than low Earth orbit. So there's amazing things they can do with it.
John, you mentioned when Bob did his last couple of flights, he came back without any memories.
Right.
And he just felt uncomfortable, and that was why he left the program.
Well,
or
they gave him the choice after they caught him of eventually coming back after he resolved his personal thing. And he told me the reason I wouldn't go back is because the last two flights I couldn't remember what I did, and I don't want to work under those circumstances.
So Anna is asking about what that problem is, and we're now on the topic of mind control. Is that right?
Okay. And the mind control was developed by the Nazis even before they came over to the United States in 1948 through 1950, Project Paperclip. And it even developed to the point where in 1969 they were able to convince the six Apollo crews that allegedly went to the moon that they went to the moon. They really believe it. People that I talk to that know that the Apollo program was a hoax and say that they know, they've talked with the astronauts themselves and said, look, there's some people that are saying it's a hoax. No, it's not a hoax. I went up there. I did everything. And the mind control is so sophisticated that they can make them believe that. Now, 20 years later, here's Bob Lazar not being able to remember what he did at work. And I'm saying that what I knew about it was the fact that in the 70s, the trouble they were having with the people that worked up at the test site was that when they came back to Las Vegas, to their families, they were always bothered by this nagging thing that there's something they did that they should know about that they just can't quite remember, and it was screwing up their lives. Whereas apparently they had it refined to the point when Bob went up there that not only couldn't they remember, but they didn't even remember that they couldn't remember, and so it wasn't bothering them when they came home, and that was the advance in the mind control.
So Apollo didn't go there.
Absolutely not. Absolutely. Anybody that says
so
Apollo
what did
went
go there, and did anything go there, and are we actually there? And if we're not there, who is there?
The moon was made in Jupiter about 20 billion years ago. It came to Earth between 15 and 20,000 years ago. This time, whether it came before or not, I don't know. But this time, it came 15 to 20,000 years ago.
How do you know that?
Sleeper told me.
Explain.
Sleeper is Lou Baldwin, who was the guy that posted the stuff on ATS. He's the guy that I think has real information.
ATS is a company website?
Above Top Secret is the people that had the largest forum in the United States as far as information on the internet. You know what I'm talking about? Okay. And I was their chief, I think they called it chief's conspiracy theorist. and then I got kicked out of there.
John, are you saying that you have been a conspiracy theorist?
I call it reality, but other people call it conspiracy. So I was their chief conspiracy theorist, and we came to a disagreement in I believe it was 2006, and then I've since been to a couple other forums, and now I'm at Godlike Productions, and all I do is just say, I'm John Lear, ask me a question or something like that, or I am the real John Lear, ask me a question. And so that's where I get the questions from. Now, you asked, who did I get that information from? I got it from Sleeper. But as far as, and it depends on which information, the Apollo hoax is so all-encompassing. So many people have so much to say about that, to contribute to the hoax. I mean, there's no possibility that it could be real. I mean, now there's so many people that have found out things about the moon that would make it impossible for the Apollo mission to have gone there. For instance, the fact that it's not 1/6 gravity, it's 70% of Earth's gravity. This means it can hold an atmosphere. This means that people live there. The population of the moon is, based on my estimate, is between 1.5 and 2 billion people. And they're people just like us, but more advanced sociologically and technologically.
So call that point one. Let's give us the top 6 points about this whole thing.
What's top 6 points?
About the moon hoax, the Apollo hoax.
Oh.
And the moon problem.
The fact that they only had 22,000 pounds of fuel in the lunar module. And the fact that with...
what does that mean? 22,000 pounds of fuel?
They had 22,000 pounds of fuel to deorbit from the 60-mile orbit that they were placed in around the moon, to come down, land, then take off, reacquire an orbit at 60 miles with 70% gravity of Earth, and then hook up with the command module with 22,000 pounds. It just can't happen. There's not that much fuel. All of the stuff was based on the moon having 1/6 gravity, and we all know that Neil Armstrong and both Neil and Buzz have said that they landed with 45 seconds of fuel. So that means they used all the fuel. So since then, since 1969, we have found out, number one, with the CERN announcement 2 weeks ago, having tried to find out the little bosons. They can't find those, but they did find out the neutrinos can travel faster than the speed of light. Now, the other things that can travel faster than the speed of light are anti-mesons, the Cherenkov effect. The Cherenkov effect is the effect of when radiation contacts air, it turns blue. And superluminals. Superluminals are the things way out in space that travel from one place to another faster than the speed of light. So this is 4 things we have traveling faster than the speed of light, which completely blows Einstein's theories, both general and special, out of the water. And with it, it takes Newton's second law. And Newton's second law has to do with the density and quantity of matter. And there is no basis for Newton's assumption that the gravitational force of anything is due and is proportional to the quantity and density of matter, or inert matter. So that blows everything that the NASA's did as far as computing the gravity of planets. Everything, including the moon. And so now that is the end of all discussion about Apollo, because there's no possible way they could have gone. Now, let's see. I don't think I can call up right away. You wanted 6 points. The number point is the lunar module itself, the one that was built at Grumman, looks like a peak of junk. And the astronauts themselves say there's no way that this thing not only could have gone to the moon, but could have gone into deorbit, landed, and reorbited.
It was built for show.
It was built for show. The engine was 10,000 pounds of thrust, and it was either on or off. And you hear the Mr. Space.com and Phil Plait, who are the NASA promoters, and they're trying to tell us one of the main problems with the lander is why isn't there a deep depression under where this 10,000 pound rocket motor landed the lander, and why isn't there dust on the landing pads?
They said something about the density of the exhaust gases wasn't sufficient to disturb the dust or something.
Pardon?
The rocket density, the gas density leaving the rocket nozzle wasn't big enough to disturb the particles.
They say that the reason that there's no dust there is that because it came in an angle like this, and when it got right over the spot, it just turned up and landed like that. But that's ridiculous. It didn't happen like that. And Armstrong's the one that says engines off, tranquility base here, and that means that he didn't say engines off until they were landed. They didn't turn them off slightly before they got there. So that knocks Phil Plait and the Space.com idiot out of the water with why there's no dust on the pads and why there isn't a depression right under the nozzle of the 10,000 pound rocket.
So who came up with the atmosphere on the moon, the latest calculations?
I've been pushing the atmosphere for 5 or 6 years.
Well, a friend, Vladimir Tzitsky, was doing this at the American Academy of Dissident Scientists.
Machinists working in metal factories producing the panels for the craft. Engineers that work on the project. Test pilots that flew some of the craft. Eyewitnesses that watched these craft at Peenemünde, watched German-made crafts at Reno, Nevada, much later in the 60s. We found, and I persuaded for these guys to give an interview, the Secret Society members of Vienna, the Thule Society.
What was his name?
Vladimir Tzitsky.
Okay.
He used to do some stuff here with Al Balik in some of the early conferences.
Yeah, that's possible. And another person was...
and that's why all the photographs are black and white, because there were subtle colors on the lunar surface.
Yeah. And the same thing with Virsoff, Strange World of the Moon. V.A. Virsoff talked about it in his book about the colors and the atmosphere on the moon. And the first one to talk about people living on the moon was the famous Danish mathematician Hansen. And in 1856, he made a presentation to the Royal Astronomical Society that, based on his figures of the gravity and the orbit of the moon, that he felt that there was enough gravity on the far side to hold enough atmosphere for people to live there. And
that's because the far side is thicker than the near side.
There's 6 miles more to the moon on the far side than there is. So everybody loved that over there until 1870, when the head of the Navy Observatory, a guy named Admiral Newcomb, came over to Paris for the specific job of discrediting Hansen. And the reason was because the Navy didn't want anybody thinking there was anything up on the moon other than old rocks and gray material, when in fact they knew exactly what was up there, which is a civilization, and so on and so on.
Does that civilization live underground?
No, they live on top. That's a picture over there of a city that's 120 miles to the northwest of Copernicus. See, this road comes down here, and the road here, and then all these little houses and buildings and what Nancy's done.
That looks like Vegas.
Those are factories where they've taken a little black and taken off some corners, strategic corners, so you can't make a building out of it in your eyes. But right here, all this stuff there, look at those roads there. Now, these long, straight ones, those are where they join the
pictures.
Yeah, the pictures.
Yeah.
So those can't be counted. No. But these, look, goes down there. Yeah. Here's a little airplane waiting to be flown. Factories, all that stuff.
That's easier.
Oh, towers, okay. That's a photo that NASA's never published. That's on the far side of the moon. I got it from a friend of mine bid on the estate, on some of the packages in an estate in New Orleans, which just happened to be one of the guys who was authorizing the photos of the Lunar Orbiter series. And he passed away, and these happen to be some of the photos that they didn't want shown. And this guy called me, and I got these 25 photos, and this is one of them. And this shows a refinery on the far side of the moon. See if you can jiggle your imagination to see that that's a refinery.
I wouldn't have any imagination about these things. I'd have predictive analysis. Okay. How do you say that one?
Endymion? Okay. We're looking at Endymion, which is at the very top of the moon as we see it from Earth.
Okay.
It's about 30 miles in diameter. And what you see on the right-hand part of the crater is the cranes. Now,
they look like a huge crane, some sort of headquarters and central observation point.
Yeah, you can see that these cranes are built to lift spheres, and these cranes go as far back as 1936 on Yerkes photos. That's YERKES. That's one of the larger telescopes here. And 1946 is when they were in the process of building these cranes. On the below the cranes, inside the crater, you can see lots of apartment buildings. They're all on a line there. They all have windows out to the front, and that's where the people live that stay there. And then on the left part of the screen are the huge spheres. And according to Dr. Resnick, those are the spheres that hold the helium-3. And what he calls this whole operation is a wellhead. We're looking at a wellhead for mining helium-3 from the moon.
And they use that on the power supply systems on the moon, or do they ship it back to Earth?
No, nothing gets shipped back to Earth. There's a technical name for using it on site, and I forget what it's called, but they use it in situ.
Now, you're saying, what's the date of this facility? You said 1936 or 46?
Well, the Yerkes photo I have is 46, but I think I have another earlier one that you can see it as far back as 1936.
That means that these are not man-made ones. Are they? They're of the facilities of the moon by the. What do you call the people on the moon?
Moon people.
Moon people.
I believe there's between 1.5 and 2 billion people up there. They look identical to us, but they're more advanced sociologically and also technologically advanced. And they're obviously the ones that built that. Now, where they came from, I don't know. They didn't come from Earth.
Now, why do they not come from Earth? Are they not vestigial people from Earth's previous civilization before they collapsed? Or are they the people who brought the moon from Jupiter?
Well, I really don't know. But the moon was built in Jupiter about 20 billion years ago. And between now and the 20 billion years, it has been towed around the solar system doing various projects. such as this one, which is monitoring Earth.
Why would they move it to here? What would be a logical reason for that?
Because this was the prison planet, and those are the guards, and that's what they were trying to. They want to guard us. They want to be sure that we can't leave the Earth and go out and spread our form of democracy to the other planets in the solar system.
So who are they? Who decides this? The guards. Who are the guards?
Those guys.
Yeah, well, you can't point to your own ceiling, so that that's not precise. You can do better than.
That's all I can do. That's the best I can do.
The farthest back written history, or mouth-to-mouth history, is that at one time there was no moons, and then there was 2 moons, and then there was 1 moon. So I don't know whether the second moon was the electromagnetic vehicle that was putting our moon in place, or whether it was something else.
Do we want to go? Yep.
Now, when I say the electromagnetic vehicle, I was talking to Dr. Berggren, who did the research on Saturn and found the huge vehicles in the rings of Saturn. I asked him where the electromagnetic vehicle is at this time, and he said it was probably on the far side of the moon. So we looked for a place where it might be, and we think we found it on the crater Tchaikovsky. And the crater Tchaikovsky, if you're looking directly at the far side of the moon, is to the lower left. And it's a crater that has an artifact in the middle of it that's probably about 10 miles wide and about 10 miles high. And this thing has been changed by NASA, has been airbrushed by NASA at least 7 different times.
Now, this is the slide that you said TSIO 12.
That's correct. That's the one that shows the 7 different versions, because NASA is so afraid that we might find out what it is that it keeps putting in an object that might be more believable than the first one they put in.
So they're actually actively changing their mind on things, but not
Actively, yes.
Yes.
Actively, yes.
So this, to be precise, is 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. What is that feature? What exactly is it?
We think that's the electromagnetic vehicle, or EMV, that towed the moon into place, into orbit around the moon, and set it so that it revolves once every month or every 30 days. And what that does is that keeps the near side visible to the Earth at all times, but no other part of the moon.
Yet the far side of the moon's got a much thicker crust. Surely that moon should be wobbling like blazes if one half is heavier than the other half.
You would think so. The Danish physicist, whose name was Hansen, presented a paper in 1856 to the Royal Astronomical Society that the far side was 56 miles further out than the near side.
That's a long way. That's a big difference.
And then Dr. Resnick, who was on Coast to Coast with me the other night, said it was 72 miles. He said because that's where we landed, because there was less gravity at 72 miles than at 56 miles. Now, whether he's accurate or not, I don't know. What he implies is that we're actively going to the moon, but I've yet to be convinced of that.
Talk about the rings of Saturn.
Yeah, the rings of Saturn were, the book is up there, was a book written by a friend of mine, Norm Berggren, and I visited him several times. I failed to get to his 90th birthday, which was held at Stanford University last summer. But after he retired from a successful career as an engineer and scientist for some of the major companies, including Lockheed, he retired in 1983, and he got interested in the Voyager pictures of Saturn's rings. And he spent the rest of his life getting the best pictures he could and showing what we believe to be huge ships in the rings of sitting in the rings of Saturn.
You're referring to the ring makers of Saturn?
Ring makers of Saturn. The ships in the rings of Saturn that he showed us were 30,000 miles long and 1,800 miles in diameter. Now, we're talking about a fairly large rocket ship when we talk about 30,000 miles long. But anyway, it's there. He shows them. He shows the 4-color pictures. He's still living in Los Altos Hills in San Francisco. I haven't seen him for a couple of years, but I do keep in touch. He was most interested, changed his interest to Saturn's, I forget. It's the one that's all white. Anyway, that's been his interest in... or
claim that they landed on the moon. And how's this fiction maintained?
Nobody's paying any attention. Nobody is paying any attention to what's going on. There's people that look at this and say, "This is unbelievable. Why isn't anybody paying attention to this?" But they're getting away with it because nobody's there. They keep.
It was such a happy occasion. It was such monumental happiness that people doesn't want to let something like that go in face of.
That's exactly it. People are more comfortable with what they got. They've got enough problems with, thinking they have to worry about Afghanistan, Iraq, Africa, and all the other problems on Earth, plus raising their kids, plus trying to make enough money to eat, and they're not going to worry about the moon.
Economy and,
What?
Totally corrupt economy.
Right, and a totally corrupt government,
Yeah.
and now you want them to worry about the moon and whether astronauts went there.
The one thing that was, made you proud.
Yeah, that's right. The one thing that they could be proud of.
Yeah.
And
Okay, John. One day I was fixing a pirate radio station in Ireland.
Myself and one of the tower riggers were looking up at the tower. What we saw was this space plane overfly our tower at approximately 10,000 feet. What the hell was this? While I had a Canon A1 power-winding 35mm SLR only yards away, the craft was gone over the horizon over Belfast within 8 seconds. This craft was clearly landing somewhere northeast of the site. This could be Machrihanish or anywhere from Sweden to Finland or even northern Russia.
And it was a spacecraft. And I wasn't able to take a picture of it because it was traveling so fast. And this brings us onto the secret space program. So let's talk about the secret space program.
Okay, the secret space program actually started with the Nazis taking over NASA and putting all their people in at the top level. And about the time they were putting the secret space program together, which is to put satellites, weaponized satellites around the Earth to take control of the Earth, and to further Hitler's scheme, who was still alive then. He died in 1969 and headed this program up until then.
Now, this is very important because I've done an interview with Dr. Carol Rosen, who was Werner von Braun's personal spokesperson.
Right.
And she's pushing a campaign to prevent the weaponization of space. I've also interviewed certain individuals who are saying that, yes, it's weaponized already, and there are bases on the moon and Mars, but how much of this is puff and blow, we don't know. So let's get to the detail.
Okay, I don't think there's any weapons on the moon and Mars, but I think that there's 24 orbiting weaponized satellites run by the Navy, SPAWAR, S-P-A-W-A-R. If you type it in, they'll see. They have over 2,000 astronauts going back and forth all the time. The astronauts are comprised by the Army, Navy, Air Force, Marines, NASA. There's probably 8 different entities that go back and forth. This program was started by Project Aquila that was launched three months before the launch of Apollo 11. And Project Aquila put the first equipment in space beginning to put these 24 orbiting weaponized satellites up there.
Only America has this, that not China or Russia has the same weapons up there. Why is that?
Well, we allied ourselves with some pretty bad ETs, and they have, in return for some false promises, they have given us some really really powerful weapons.
Yep.
Okay, Damaso
Okay, Damaso. Yeah.
is the city that's on the far left of the moon.
This is a highly gridded structure. Lots of...
I haven't been able to see. Now you can see the city there, right?
Yeah, there's a whole like a layout of Los Angeles almost.
Okay, I can't find the McDonald's, but supposedly there's one there.
Yeah, there probably is a McDonald's. Is it? Do you think that would be an organic McDonald's?
NASA says that they didn't take any color, and the original positives were 20 by 24, and the positives that I've been able to get from NASA are 16 by 20. That's the the city that is 125 miles to the northwest of Copernicus, and the crater there is called Tobias Myers.
Tobias Myers.
Or Tobias Mayer. Tobias Mayer. And the main photo, the 16 by 20, includes much more than I showed. All I showed was the part that shows part of the city where you can see a diagonal road going from the top or the
from around about maybe 7 o'clock up till maybe 2 o'clock or 1 o'clock.
Right, that's correct. That's one of the roads, and you can see the if you have a good imagination like I do, houses and trees and stuff like that.
Are those apple trees or vine trees?
Pear trees.
Pear
they
trees.
don't grow apples on the moon. Aristarchus is on the far left side of the moon at about 10 o'clock, and it has traditionally been whited out by any NASA or any other photo that you've ever seen, and the reason is because it's very clearly a structure of some sort that radiates the color blue. Now, we know that the Cherenkov effect radiates the color blue when radiation comes in contact with regular air. So one of the scientists at Lawrence Livermore Laboratories came down and looked at our photo at San Jose when it was on display, and he said that's the Cherenkov effect. So he would certainly know more about it than us.
So that means there's a substantially radioactive source.
Right, 23 miles in diameter, and you can see the structure there, that whatever they're producing, if it is power, then it would be producing power for the entire moon, that it's so big.
That's venting. That's a vent?
It's actually a reactor. Now, it could be a vent, but it seems like the whole structure is a reactor.
City of Batavius B.
Oh, Batavius B?
Yeah.
Okay, Batavius B is on the near side of the moon. To the right side, as we look at it from Earth, it's the brightest object that we can see, and it looks like a city to me. You can see the background, the main part of the city, and then you can see two what appear to be extensions, or they're far too big to be a road, but
they look like supporting struts of some kind, or riddles, and it looked like ridges.
Right. They come down to the right and the left, and the one on the left even makes another angle.
Yes, it does. It turns right angles.
Right.
That well-known natural angle.
Okay, this is the one that shows the terminal on the far side, and there's a better picture that I'll send you I'll send you the website where to get it, where it's outlined in much greater detail. But this is one of the terminals, and you can see the three gates, 120 degrees from each other.
Yeah.
And then you can see the walkway.